We want to make sure this message gets to every single human being. Won't you please help support this work? We need your help to get this message out to every Jew and every non-Jew. The actions to take, have your money come to rabbismith.org so that we can get a message of hope to every human being.
Welcome. And we are here learning and continuing with Rabbi Steif's holy work, Mitzvos Hashem, which is the commandments that apply to every single human being. We're specifically learning the commandments that apply to Bnei Noach. And this is in the third section of his holy work, Mitzvos Hashem. And we are on page Shin Nun Gimel, which is page 353. And we are in the 35th chapter, Siman Lamed Hey, about not going in the ways of those people whose actions and behavior and are foreign to the service of God Almighty. So we're not supposed to go in their way. So now we're going to have a discussion about the concept of men covering their hair, covering their heads. I mean, women have to cover their hair, men have to cover their heads. And we have over here in Tessus Zion, the Inyan ha'isur shel gili rosh kasav. So in the context of the prohibition of revealing the head, it's said, brought down by the Taz Torei Zahav, which is one of the explainers of the Code of Jewish Law. He brings that there's opinions that this is not something that's prohibited to walk around with for Jewish men to walk around with his head uncovered. It's not a essential law, but rather it is proper conduct of a person who wants to conduct themselves in the ways of Chassidus, meaning to say, this is the use of the word Chassidus here is not talking about Chassidus per se of the study of the Torah, Chassidus of the Baal Shem Tov and his disciples, but rather Chassidus is a general term referring to people who want to be mischasid and koine, who want to be going above and beyond in the service, doing loving kindness for the Creator, for God Almighty. And the way that a person would do loving kindness for God Almighty is for a man to wear a head covering. So he writes that even not at the times of prayer, because everyone agrees that at the time of prayer that a Jewish man should wear a head covering. So even at the times that are not the times of prayer, then a person should still be careful. A man should be careful to cover his head. Because the people tend to gravitate or grasp onto frivolity and to breaking the boundaries of holiness. And he concludes by saying that to me it appears that today there is a prohibition in the matter of covering the head, for the reason that since today it is a established custom, like a law that the way the non-Jews, those that are foreign to the service of God Almighty, the way they conduct themselves, they are constantly walking around with their heads uncovered. And in example, not only they're walking around with their heads uncovered, but even if they wear the head covering outside in the street, but when they come into a building, either it's one of their temples, or it is just, as we're going to see, just sitting around for dinner or sitting and meeting, they take off their hats. As soon as they sit down, they remove their hat. So therefore, this should be included, he says, in the general prohibition of not going in the ways of those whose activities and beliefs are foreign to the service of God Almighty. How much more so? I just went over the other page. I'm going to finish this sentence. that says, and then I'll bring up the next page, that there's a reason for this. That covering the head is indicating on the awe of heaven, meaning the fear, the awe of God Almighty. Let me get you here so there is two parts over here saying that in general, we have to stay away from anything that would be emulating the ways of those whose activities are foreign to the service of God Almighty. But in addition, that would be a good reason not to sit or walk with the head uncovered. But in addition, we have a positive reason, something that would get us to want to wear a head covering, which is that covering our head points to the awe of God Almighty, the awe of heaven. And like it's brought down in the Talmudic tractate in Shabbos Kufim Vav Amud Beis on the second side of the 156th page. Masechta Shabbos, Ki Sereshech Ki Heichi Heicha the Lahavi that it said that this is an incident where a mother was told by an astrologer that her son was going to be born and become a thief. And so therefore she was very, very particular that he should always have a head covering on, because she said when he's going to wear this head covering, then he's going to have the fear of God. He's going to be particular about serving God Almighty. So therefore he won't be a thief, God forbid. So this was successful. Meaning when he wore this head covering, he was an upright person. Kedushin, also in the Talmudic tractate of Kedushin, on the 30 Lamed Beis, Amud Aleph, the 33rd page on the first side. Amu kama chatzifa hu gavra. So this is an incident where there was a great Torah sage and someone went by and he didn't have his head covered. And one of the other sages pointed out, this person is so chutzpah, he is so disrespectful for being in the presence of a great Torah sage and not having a head covering. So we see that the head covering is something that brings a person to be in awe of heaven, awe of God Almighty, and it's also something that shows respect, even among human beings. It shows respect for another human being to have a head covering in his presence. It's sign lamag shkosov hamira the and he quotes to what's written in the Nevuchim, and also in the explanations of the Gra, Birya Gra, the Vilna Gaon, Sham Tzayin Kama Kremis V'Shas, and also brings a number of places in the Talmud, Shemuchach the Medina Ein Iser Klal B'Rosh Magul Le'elam, that proves that from the essential law, there is no prohibition at all for having the head uncovered at any time. There's never a prohibition of having the head uncovered from a strictly Torah law perspective. Only just when you're in front of great people, then you should cover your hair. Or at the times of prayer. Then it's proper in front of these great people, or at the time of prayer, it's proper to wear a head covering from the aspect of this lesson, of this point about respect and having the fear of God. So, and the rest of the day for the holy people that are standing constantly before God Almighty, they should wear it. And that is the end of the quote. So this is at the beginning of the is something that's the beginning of the discussion. And let's see, I have a comment in the chat over here. Okay, so someone's asking a question. Covering one's head. I have knowledge of cross cultures for different reasons, and in many belief systems, women cover their head during times of prayer. I've seen that some pious non-Jewish women cover their head partially in awe of Hashem, or if they're married, is this permissible? Well, yes. Anything that shows honor and reverence for God Almighty is something that's permissible for any human being to do, and it's actually something that's good for them to do. And we're going to see that we learned previously about married women covering their hair all the time. And you're bringing out a point that's in other cultures. Women cover their hairs, particularly if they're not covered all the time, they would cover their hair during times of prayer, cover their head during times of prayer. And so the presumption over here, so in the Torah, the way people conduct themselves is that the men cover their heads all the time with a yarmulke, and a married woman, covers her hair all the time. But an unmarried girl does not cover her hair, but an unmarried boy would still cover his head. And we train our boys to cover their head all the time from the very earliest ages, even before the age of 3. Let's do the next paragraph. Because we started late, we're not going to get through the whole discussion, but we'll just continue here, so we'll make a little more progress and then conclude this topic next week. Yud Zayin, paragraph 17. Chasam Sefer. In the Torah sage, the Chasam Sefer, he writes in the Chedusha of Mesachas Nedarim, in his explanations, his bringing to light new inspirations and insights into the Talmudic tractate of Nedarim on Lamed Amid base, which is the 30th page on the second side. Hiskim Ladas Hataz. He agrees with the opinion of the Taz that in our times, that the the worshippers of idolatry, have made a established practice for the service of idols to go with revealed heads and to honor the idolatries with this. So they might wear a hat outside, but when they come to one of their places of worship, they take off their head covering. So therefore, because this is the conduct of the worshippers of idols to uncover their heads as part of their service of their idolatry and honoring their idolatry, then therefore it is forbidden to us from the essential law. So what happened, this is something we discussed earlier, that it's not any better situation or different situation than that of monuments for worshiping God, putting up like stones and stuff like that, that this was loved at the times of the fathers, meaning to say our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when the locals made this an established copied this and made this an established practice for idolatry, then it became despicable to God Almighty, to the Holy One, blessed be He. And so, how much more so here? Ayin Sham, see what the Chasam Sefer writes. So now that it has become the practice of idolaters to take off their head covering in honor of their idolatry, that therefore we have to say, even though maybe in the past it was permissible for a Jewish man to leave his head uncovered, but now since it's the practice of the idolaters to uncover their heads, therefore we have to keep our heads covered. But I am a Chuvas Yiriyos Shleme, Shekasov She'avan Plilihu, the Yeshev, the base Vad Akal. So one of the holy Sforim, one of the holy books writes that it's a tremendous, astonishing sin to sit in the house of the base of Vad. Base Vad means like the community leadership. Base Vad Akal, literally the house of the committee of the congregation of the community. That they sit there, that they're sitting there, the people that want to do good for the city, meaning to say the city leadership that look out for the well-being of the people, and they're sitting there to be involved with the needs of the congregation. Begili Rosh, and they're sitting with their heads uncovered. v'hagois banav sham tachas hashua kibtzu hashitus b'inyan zeh. And in the notes that are brought by the son of that author, underneath the line in his holy work, that son collates the different opinions, the different perspectives in this matter. So these are now two more recent people, meaning to say in the 1800s, that were writing about the importance of covering the head, and not just at the time of prayer and the time of honoring those who are not just the time of prayer and the time of honoring the great Torah sages, but really all the time, because we don't want to do the way those who are serving idolatry do, which is to uncover the head, specifically when they sit or come into the presence of idolatry, or they're sitting together. So we've seen a number of different reasons. One is because taking off the head covering leads to irreverence and leads to breaking boundaries and inappropriate conduct. And we saw that it's also important to wear it because it brings reverence and awe of heaven. And we saw that it's important not to emulate the ways of the non-Jews that go in the ways of idolatry, because they are taking off their head coverings at the time of at various times, and we should therefore not take off our head coverings at all. Okay, so we're going to pause there for today, and we'll continue with the 18th paragraph next time. Any questions? Okay, good. Sorry that we had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning. And God willing, we'll continue in a happy and wonderful opportunity next week with Rabbi Steif's learning Rabbi Steif. And then Wednesday night is our class on prayer, and Thursday night is our leaders learning. I look forward to seeing you all at each one of those. God bless you all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.